If you are unhappy and bored with your life, that is on you. We get to create the lives we live. And a lot of times they become these giant ships that you can't just like change direction in a day. But like if your ship is sailing in a direction that you are bored with or unhappy with or unfulfilled by, you also are the one who can slowly change that ship.
Welcome to the Let Me Save You 25 Years podcast. I am your host, Shawn David Nelson, that love sack guy. Got a funny story for you. I'm standing in the first love sack store. We had just opened like 2 weeks ago and had started selling sacks. We couldn't believe it. Like it was actually kind of working. And this guy comes in and like the music's going and the TV's showing movies and like the vibe is there. Gateway Mall, Salt Lake City, 2001. Heading into Christmas. And this person says like, this is so cool. Who do I talk to about a franchise? And I see this conversation happening. He's talking to my cousin over there. It's just me and my cousin work in the store. And my cousin hands him my card and says, here, call this guy. He's like the head guy. And I run out of the store and I stand out on the bridge of the gateway and answer my phone. This call comes in from Arizona number. And I answer, Shawn, Lovesack Corporation. How can I help you? And this guy says, who do I talk to about a franchise? I said, what location are you in? He said, your Salt Lake store. I said, oh yeah, that's a good one. A month later, we were selling franchises. Bear in mind, we had one location at the time, right? But I was full of just confidence. We were having some success. We were ripping. The vibe was on. The music was playing. We were having a good time. And that was my state of mind, at 23 years old, 24, whatever. And that was just who I was. But how I got there, right? How I got myself into that state. And maybe it was just in that moment, caught me at the right time where I had the confidence to kind of fake it till I made it. And we're going to talk about that today. The Shawnism, today's episode, choose confidence because it is a choice. You can just choose it. You don't get to choose necessarily how you look. Your genetics make that up. You might be able to make some alterations, whatever. You don't get to choose where you were born or, what kind of status you were born into, but you do get to choose confidence and you can fake it till you make it. And it's built on optimism and all kinds of things. And we're going to have this fantastic conversation with an amazing celebrity guest today, where we'll talk about how optimism for most of us is actually a skill that needs to be practiced. Right? I didn't just wake up that way. I had to fight for it every day. I still do today, every day of my life. Fight for that optimism and confidence. You have to show up for yourself, no matter what version of yourself you are today. We'll talk about how true confidence is love. What that means, right? It's one thing just to fake it and project it. It's another thing to build yourself into the kind of person that is so full of love, a person that exudes love on a daily or hopefully moment to moment basis, where confidence then becomes you. As Lindsey Stirling, our guest today, says, write the sails of your own ship because, by the way, no one else will. We will cover some deep waters in today's amazing conversation with the world famous Lindsey Stirling. Enjoy. Our guest today is proof that confidence isn't something you're just born with. It's something you can build one bold move at a time. She is a classically trained violinist who didn't just break the mold. She danced all over it in combat boots and full costume. She's turned YouTube videos into a global fan base, rejection into reinvention, and a violin into a full-blown performance art revolution. But what I love most about our guest is that behind the sparkles, the choreography, and the jaw-dropping talent, she's built her success on something that we all actually have access to if we choose confidence. And more importantly, she chooses it every single day. Please welcome the one and only Lindsey Stirling.
Woo! Oh my goodness, that was a cool little intro. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm going to follow you wherever you go and deliver that. And
I appreciate it.
You enter from now on. All right, Lindsey, without thinking too hard, when you heard our topic today, choose confidence, what's the first thing that came to mind?
Well, my first thought was like, "Oh, I love that." It resonates with me, I guess is the right term. Just because I really think a lot of life is a choice. I think a lot of, and I think that gives us a lot of power. It's easy sometimes to look at other people and feel like they just had it lucky or they just had it good, but honestly, it's a million micro choices that take us to where we're at, obviously combined with luck and opportunity. But, really it comes down to the fact that every day we get to make these little micro choices. And I think a very key one of those is, like you said, choosing confidence.
That's great. So, uh, can you think of a time where you maybe didn't feel the confidence you really needed to pull it off, but somehow you were able to just make that choice?
I can think of really dramatic examples, and I can also think of very like everyday examples. You know what I mean? Like,
Hey, give us one of each.
okay, a really everyday example is, I recently moved to a new city, and I have to make the choice a lot to be like, I'm gonna go to that event that, like there was a pool party for the 4th of July
Mm,
um at this place, and I didn't know anybody, but I decided I'm gonna go
wow.
into that pool party, and it was packed, and I didn't know anybody, and I was like, I need to not feel small just because I don't know anybody here. And and that's a really, it takes you back to like the junior high version of yourself standing in the end of the cafeteria being like, who do I sit by? And that's like a very human feeling. And so, like, just as simple as it is at this pool party, just being like, I'm not going to allow myself to feel small just because I don't know somebody. And I'm going to try to talk to some people, and I'm not going to leave until I just have a few conversations. And I did. And it made me feel, fine. And I reminded myself that that was brave. And then I went on my merry way. So that's just a very everyday example of choosing in this moment not to be small. Um, and to, and like I said, I came away with some really nice conversations. A more dramatic example is before my last tour, I had this goal where I wanted to do aerial silks for the first time. And anytime
Mm,
you're learning a new skill, it's quite scary, especially when you're like, I'm going to be in front of an audience doing this live when I'm still a little nervous. In
wow.
this case, actually a little bit afraid, hanging upside down
Totally.
wrapped in fabric, playing the violin. And it got to a point where I really had to decide, is this worth going forward? Because actually I had been rehearsing so much that my arms started to get tingly and numb, and as a violinist that was quite terrifying, being like, oh my gosh, what am I doing to my hands, like just
Yeah.
the strength it takes to like climb and grip fabric. And so I came to this moment where it was like the tour was like a week out, and I was in a lot of pain, and I was like, this is the moment I get to decide whether I move forward or whether I say we'll do this another tour. And either answer is fine. But I was like, I'm a big believer in trusting like your true like heart's desire. And I was like, no, 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 I really want to do this. And so I kind of kept pushing. And anyways, turns out I was able to get the strength. I like nailed it just in time. And it was literally the thing that everybody posted about at every show. Was everybody was posting about the part where it's hanging upside down, wrapped in fabric, playing a violin. Obviously, that's the moment. So, you know, it was worth it. But again, it was just like, I remember like going to these rehearsals, being exhausted and looking up at that big thing of fabric, being like, can I try it one more time? Can I climb it one more time to practice? And just basically doing it as long and as hard as I could.
Yeah. I love hearing both of these examples, Lindsey. I think let's start with like the aerial silks. Um, People look at someone like you and they see a video. Obviously you've built a career on videos and they're all amazing, of course, one more amazing than the next. You're dancing around, flipping around, playing the violin. Now you're upside down, hanging from the ceiling. I think people sometimes don't even connect the fact that you're just a girl choosing to climb up a piece of silk, and especially the first time, right, where you're doing it in front of people, you're actually risking your body, you're risking your life, and there's always a first time, and it's probably you know terrifying to get the confidence to do that, let alone all the little voices in our head that can be like, to your point, legitimately, hey, we'll do this next time. I'm a little sore today. And how do you make that distinction between when it's legitimately right? Because I'm sure you've had those experiences too, to maybe not do a certain stunt or not do something as opposed to like, no, I'm going for it, even through the pain. How do you make that distinction?
I feel like I've just really learned to listen to these like inner voices. And sometimes you got to recognize that, okay, that's the voice of fear. That's trying to protect me, but it's a voice of fear. It's not a true compass. Like that's just nerves. That's my brain talking to me saying this could be embarrassing or like this could be uncomfortable. That's the voice of fear. But then there's this like inner voice that's like excitement of like, I want to do this. And then there's the like, so there's all these different voices. And then there's like your true heart that's like, I think this is right. Um, and I just remember, I'll never forget one of the first times I got a big no. And it was before I started my career, or I guess before it took off. And there had been this fiddle group that I'd always wanted to be a part of. I remember being in orchestra as a kid, and this group Barrage was like fiddle players, and they kind of like played with like rock music a little bit, and it was just really cool. And I'd always thought someday I want to audition for Barrage. And right before I started my YouTube channel, I got an opportunity to audition for Barrage. And
Mm.
I remember I was so excited. I sent in a video. They were like, "We love you. We just want you to fly to Chicago and audition." Anyways, long story short, I could not practice the music. I don't know why. I was so like, every time I'd go to practice, it just was like literally pulling teeth to work on this music. And I'd already bought my flight. And the night before the ticket, to fly to Chicago to just basically meet them and play in person. And then the job was mine. I just was like so distraught and so stressed and so anxious. And finally, I just called the guy and I made up an excuse that I was sick. And I like cried after I hung up the phone because I was like, this is something I've always wanted. Why do I feel like I cannot do it? And it wasn't fear. It wasn't, it wasn't embarrassment. It was like an inner gut feeling being like, this isn't right. Shortly thereafter, I started my own YouTube channel. My world took off. And instead of being a part of a group that, you know, dictated what and exactly how I played, I had my own career. And it's like, I think that the spirit, God, my intuition, whatever it was being like, don't do this. And at the time, I felt like I was a cop out. I felt kind of like a failure. Like, oh, am I just too afraid? Am I just like, what's wrong with me? But there are different voices, and I think it's really important to start to learn to recognize which ones are the no's and the fear, and which ones are like the no's from your inner knowing and heart.
Man, that's powerful. We have so many different voices in our heads, in our minds, in our bodies, uh, telling us different things, sometimes conflicting, usually conflicting. And the ability to discern, right? The ability to start to parse those out is a fundamental ability of the successful, because I can agree with you. Like when I'm at my best, which isn't always, I'm able to be conscious of that fear voice and parse it from
Mm.
that inner voice,
Yeah.
and look, I do think it's a spiritual gift. I do think it's something that can be developed. And I think it can only be developed if you are willing to first accept that it's not all just one thing. It's not all just, well, it's me, it's how I feel, so it must be true. I think there's a lot of that going on in the world today,
Mm.
right? Where, well, it's, I don't feel like it, so I'm not going to do it. Or I feel afraid and I'm going to accept that fear. I'm going to hold, and that's really the core of today's discussion, right? Choosing confidence. So, um, look, besides you're clearly a wildly successful person. These inner voices, as you've just described, have uh, led you to both overcome fears as well as make choices that have led you down paths that were more fruitful. Like the example, can you imagine if you were just a barrage fiddler today versus like what you've achieved? You might be on that path.
Yeah, very much so. It is interesting when you see these little moments that you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that that was a huge divider in my life. That was a huge, and I will say to this thought of like these inner voices, I also think sometimes some of my experiences in life have led me to believe that there's always a right and a wrong answer.
Mm.
And almost there's like this maturing part of myself that's more recently learned that I think more often, not always, but I think a lot of times there's, I want to make the right choice. And other times I think it's, I want to make a choice and then I need to make it right. Because those are two very different things. Sometimes there is a very clear, like, this feels wrong and I'm not going to do it, or this feels so right and I'm going to chase it. Other times we can be in between these like two roads and you feel like which one is right and I can't tell, and you can almost be paralyzed by choice, and then sometimes we don't make any choices. But more recently I've just had this experience a lot where I've had to realize, like, actually maybe they're both good. Maybe they both could lead to something, and it's up to me to make a choice and then not regret it, not look backwards and be like, oh, maybe I should have done the other one. Cause,
Mm.
if everything's not perfect, it automatically makes you romanticize the other choice as if it would have been. It's like, maybe it would have been even crazier over there. Like, maybe this version of crazy that your life has turned into because of that choice. Like, lean into the life you choose, lean into the choices you and make it right, rather than being like, well, maybe the other one was right. No, make this one right. And I feel like that is just as powerful of a lesson that I've learned more recently of, yeah, you get to lean in. And I like to think that even if I'd chosen another career in life or some of these other paths, I think that God is kind and I think that he gives us multiple opportunities. And I think that eventually, maybe not the same timing, maybe not the same way, but I like to think that if I kept working on myself and believing and trying my best to trust my inner voice, I don't think one wrong step would have led me to like a completely different life. I think I eventually would have found it.
Yeah.
I like to think.
I think you're right. I I will share a related story maybe. In the earliest days of Lovesac, so I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah. We had a tiny little operation making these things, in the back room of a furniture factory for our friends and family all through college. And we gave it one last shot before I was going to close the company down and take a real job. So for
Mm,
me, this was one of those sliding door moments, right? Where
wow.
obviously, if I had flown off to China, which is where this job was, I learned Mandarin on my mission, Mandarin Chinese, and I had this job waiting for me that was amazing. Would have, I'm sure, taken up the next few years of my life, put me on a totally different path in international business. But we had gotten this order from this trade show where we had shown Lovesac, and it was a 12,000 sack order. They didn't know that it was just me and a buddy and a wood chipper. And we had to build a whole factory to try and support this. I had to source the stuff in China. They had FedEx me this pack of like, we need it in this fabric by this date for this price. I mean, this is big business, right? It's a $250,000 sale for a couple kids operating out of a back room at the time. And I turned it down like after mulling it over for days. And, I had this job offer waiting for me. I just had to finish my last couple of weeks in school. All this is happening at once.
Wow.
And I remember going over to Dave's house. He had just gotten out of the shower from his job at UPS. We were both working other jobs, trying to pay our way through school. He was wrapped up, laying on a love sack, catching a nap because he worked at like 2 a.m. And I dropped the packet on him, and I said, "Hey man, I can't do this." I said, "If you want to do it, you're welcome to take the company and try and make it happen. But like, I can't do this. I got this job waiting for me." And I opted out. And it would be weeks later that different things happened, and my life took like some other things changed in my life. And I found myself building that factory and chasing this order. And now, 25 years later, here we are today. And I've had so many different moments like that along the way where I could have quit, should have quit, even kind of did quit. And it led me back to this place where, Lovesac gets to employ a couple thousand people now. We're publicly traded. We're listed on NASDAQ. It's been worth over $1 billion. And so I don't think sometimes when we make decisions that feel final at the time, they're always final,
Yeah.
And I think you have to have a little bit of faith that things are going to work out. And for me, that's a big part of choosing confidence is maintaining this kernel of faith in the back of your mind. If you're not a natural optimist, you need to become a bit of one, because
Mhm.
optimism is power. And maintaining this little bit of faith in the back of your mind that things are going to work out. Things are going to work out. And this is something that we sometimes have to repeat to ourselves daily. In
Mhm.
my case, I have this morning mantra I talk a lot about, where I say all kinds of things to myself like that. And there is power in words, there is power in habit, there is power in faith and optimism, but only if you choose it. It's a choice.
Yeah. And I'd be curious how you feel about this, but I think very few people are natural optimists personally.
Mm. Hmm.
I I think that people learn to be optimists. I feel like I mean, I don't think I'm a natural optimist. I think that there's seasons of my life where I'm really good at being optimistic, and then there's seasons of my life when I'm just like, pull your head out of the gutter and like look at what's around you and be
Mm.
grateful. Like, girl, let's snap out of this, but it's usually I have to kind of like sink down a little bit to be like, hey, snap out of it, like let's focus, let's write in our gratitude journal again, like whatever it takes, let's meditate more, let's whatever the thing I'm stuck in, let's get out of it, because like that's not a place where you're happy, and that's not a place where you make good choices and good relationships, like all these things. But I don't know, do you believe that some people are natural optimists, or do you think most people have to work at it?
I believe that optimism is a trait and a skill, again, that can be earned and learned, but we all have a natural capacity for it, a lot or a little. I have a cousin who was around during the early days of Lovesac as another one of these. I had all kinds of friends and family helping out. And he was the most undying optimist. I used to joke
Oh,
around with him like, man, I could tell you that your head just fell off. And you'd probably tell me like, yeah, but it's going to be better this way. Yeah, I can now tape it on and turn it around backward. Like he would just look at and I thought I was an optimist, but I hang around with him and there was almost nothing that could happen to us that he couldn't spin into being like, well, this is better. And it buoyed me up. And I believe like, Lindsay, I got to get into this because look, my guess is that people around you probably perceive you as like the most hard charging, bubbly, friendly, optimistic, capable, talented girl they've ever met in their life, because they see your videos, they see you on stage. Maybe they even interact with you, when you're at your best or when you're in the zone. But you struggle, it sounds like. Do you struggle? And tell me what that feels like for someone
for
like you.
sure. I mean, like I said, I feel like I fluctuate in and out of it. And mental health is something that I really work on. It's like whether it's I'm therapy, I do breath work almost every day. I have a gratitude journal I write in at night. So like my mental health is it's a little part time job in my life, and it has been since college. It was in college that I realized that I was anorexic and that I was actually
Mm,
severely depressed. And
mm,
I'm very, very grateful that I had such a rock bottom tank moment, because I think if I'd never had that, I think I would have been satisfied with leading a kind of like mediocre mental health life where I just didn't ever realize I could work on it and get better. It would have just, because up to that point it was fine. But like now that I have like a lot of tools, and I have people that I meet that are these like amazing optimists, like my drummer. But again, he wasn't always that way. He hit a rock bottom moment and then turned his life around and flipped into this. He is such an optimist now. But again, I know it's a lot of work that he puts into it. And so whenever he's such a great gauge on tour for me, because I can see his optimism. And if I realize I'm not quite matching it, it's like, hey, let's do a little bit better. Like, wow, I've been saying a lot of negative, just like a little bit of negative self-talk. Like let's kick that, because I have this nice barometer around me of good people who are in good places. And but again, it's work, and it's been years of work, and I feel like I only get better, and I have such beautiful times because of the work I put into it. I guess that's
wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. Look, Lindsay, I struggle too. And my guess is that many people who, I don't know, see these clips or uh, even work for me, or see me see me in meetings or video conferences, who knows what, perceive me to be some kind of super optimist, super um, energetic, whatever. Because I've been told things like that, but they would have no idea of the struggles that I go through to maintain
Mm,
and to dig myself out of, to maintain my optimism, dig myself out of these holes that we can find ourselves in. Maybe it's daily, maybe it's weekly, maybe we're having kind of a bad string for a few days. Um, and here you have, look, a sample of two, at least somewhat successful people that struggle. And I think there's a lesson in that. Look, and you and I both know, we could go down the entire list of guests that I've had on the show. I think all of them, if they're being honest, would unanimously admit to having their own struggles and having to actually try to develop their way out of it, as opposed to just look. So I'm curious, when you feel down, when because we all go through now these ups and downs. We've established that, and thankfully you've had let's call it your rock bottom moment that helped you maybe recognize it and establish some habits to help you on the daily. But even now today, that you've developed some of these habits, you've had wild success. You've made some money. You had all these viral moments. You've really established yourself, with more to come. When you feel down today or tomorrow, or in the morning, or for part of a day, or whatever it is, do you give yourself grace and allow yourself to sort of allow time to let that pass a little bit, or do you fight your way out immediately? Tell me about how you operate when you face these down moments, and how you ultimately get back to choosing confidence.
you know, I feel like sometimes mental health just slightly ebbs and flows,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I love it when I'm in that mood that I'm happy for no reason. When you just feel like you're kinda like this little glowing light walking around through life, and you feel like I mean, I feel sometimes like I'm a little pixie, and it's like everywhere I go, I just wanna, like, sprinkle a little bit of love on people and, send a nice compliment, or just, like, smile at someone and hope that, like, my little pixie glowing energy will explode on them, because I just feel that happy. And whenever I'm in that state, I remind myself to be so grateful for it, because it's a gift and it doesn't last forever. So, like, really embody it today and love it. But because I know that it's fleeting, I also know that those really depressing times when for some reason I'm like, I am heavy today for like no reason at all, I remind myself this too will pass. It could pass in the next hour.
Mm,
It could, maybe it's going to stick around for a little bit, especially if it's a little more situational. Oh, next week could be better. Tomorrow could be better. Maybe a month. But knowing that mental health has a bit of an ebb and flow, and I think there's a million reasons that that happens, whether it's astrological, spiritual, situational. There's so many reasons, but it's like I just kind of keep on my little train. I do the same things pretty much on the days that I'm sad as the days I'm happy.
mm-hmm.
I pick myself up and I still go get it. I still go on stage, whether I am really depressed and I just got broken up with, or if I'm having the best day of my life. And
Awesome.
by putting on that costume, it's a little bit of a superpower. I get to be like, today I'm on that stage and I get to be there for other people. And it's the same as like if I'm calling my mom, like I get to put on these same little superhero capes all the time, entering my breathwork session, put on my little super cape, whether I am really sad or really happy. And it makes my life pretty consistent with this little ebb and flow of like, sometimes it's a little down, sometimes it's really up. And, but I just will always show up for myself no matter what the version is I am today.
That's fantastic. It's okay to embrace the down times if you can at least be honest with yourself and recognize them. Like, hey, I'm not at my best right now. And, you know, you don't just have to shake yourself out of it. Sometimes maybe you can't just shake yourself out of it, but at least you're aware of it.
Mhm.
And you might be able to mitigate some of your reactions or interactions with people in a negative way. I love as well having the opportunity to put on that costume as you described. You know, for you, it's a very literal thing. You get to literally put on the Lindsey Stirling costume and go out there and like a pro. This is the beautiful thing about show business. So I grew up in show business, actually, believe it or not. I was a singer dancer from the time I was 5 years old. And you're taught, right? Like the show must go on. It's like that old Broadway phrase.
Yeah.
And it's cheesy and pithy, but it's true. And you learn that discipline from the time you're young, because even, young people struggle. Perhaps young people struggle even more, and they're not even necessarily equipped to deal with it. But to learn that discipline, the show must go on. And so for me now, and I love that. I've experienced that. Later on, I played in bands, and I got to experience that. Like it could be completely upside down, messed up. You forget equipment. You're having a terrible day. All the things piled up at once. But man, like there's a whole room waiting for you to go on, and short of just straight up canceling, which will have other, deleterious effects on your career and whatnot, you just make it work.
Mhm.
And that is something you can get better at, but you have to practice at it. And every time we shrink from that challenge of going on with the show, whatever your show is, for me now, it's showing up in meetings with some kind of energy because people watch me because I'm a CEO.
Right.
Right. So just the way I comport myself matters, just the way I pass through a room, in my company matters. Right. So I've developed habits. Like I pass through a threshold and I smile, because if I look all stressed out, I'm walking to the bathroom, believe it or not, I could be stressing out half a dozen other people just by my energy. That's me putting on that costume, as it were, whether it's a costume or not. And sometimes you're just feeling it. Sometimes you don't need to.
Yeah.
But there is value in that. And it's not just about being yourself. It's not just about accepting who you are. And I'm just kind of sad, or I'm kind of sad today. Again, be aware of it and then put on that costume and go to work and develop the discipline to do that. So I've loved that you've discovered that superpower.
Yeah, and it's amazing how sometimes the idea of fake it till you make it really can help a lot yourself, just as much as it helps other people. And I like that you said it's not just about like shaking it off and being like, I don't feel it. It's like, I think there's so much value in being like, I'm a human, I have ups and downs, and I feel
Yeah.
it today. But I'm not going to let that stop me from the fact that I have a tour coming up and I need to practice.
Yeah. And tell me the truth. When you come off that stage, even having been like completely down, maybe going into it, how do you feel?
Oh, you feel so lifted. There is an exchange of giving that you can't deny, whether you're a performer or like, actually, I find a really beautiful exercise because this is very real on stage. You're giving a huge amount of energy and creativity, and like, you're exhausted through this exchange, but you're also being fueled by the
Yeah.
exchange of the
Yeah.
fans. So you feel this beautiful exchange on stage. But I love in like meditation, sometimes you like think about yourself and you manifest your own dreams and you're visualizing things that you want for yourself, or health, whatever it may be. But then there's also another exercise where you can send love to other people. You can, like, I love to imagine my heart getting brighter and brighter and brighter, and then sending it to somebody else, sending it to a friend that I know is struggling. It's almost like a version of a prayer for praying for people. And this beautiful exchange is one of the best ways that I know to pick myself up and to, like, in a sense, choose confidence. It's one thing to like visualize for myself, but I feel like it's actually so much more powerful when you visualize and send energy to somebody else, and it becomes this beautiful exchange that only makes you brighter. And honestly, like they say, service, anytime you're giving to somebody else, it will only improve your mood, your mental health, your confidence.
Of course. Service is an eternal principle. And whether you're doing it by sending love and energy to someone through a meditation exercise, prayer, praying for others, our thoughts directed on others' behalf instead of just our own.
Mhm.
In fact, I have it as part of my morning mantra. So I have a few lines in here I'll share from my own morning mantra, because both you and I have different practices
Mhm.
to keep ourselves optimistic, to lift ourselves up when we're feeling down, or by the way, just to keep ourselves at that high energy plane. Because to your point, the most successful people go through ups and downs, just like every other person on earth. The difference is, can you more often than not lift yourself out of that state, or at least propel yourself through that state to continue to achieve success, like you described, getting to a place where you can put on that costume and go to work, as opposed to being dominated again by our own feelings and at the whim of those feelings. So just a few lines from my morning mantra that I recite every day, if I can, out loud to myself. I won't read the whole thing, but I say to myself, first of all, I'm Heavenly Father's son. I am not just faithful, but I'm valiant, and I will shine today. So to your point about being like this pixie running around giving energy to people, I'm trying to say to myself, because by the way, I often don't feel this way, particularly in the morning, right? And in fact, then I go on to say, like, if I'm ever not feeling great, then I recite this mantra, create or work out with hesitation, or do service,
Mm.
because service will always lift you out of that state. Look for someone to do something nice for. It could be your mom. Send her some flowers. Pick up the phone, call someone, send someone a nice text. Get out of yourself and focus on someone else. And then I go on to say all kinds of different things about how I interact with my children. I look in their eyes. I seek to do service and put others' interests above their own.
Mhm.
And I could, and finally I'll wrap up. I exude love and enthusiasm to all. I'm present. I smile a lot. I am love. Look,
Mm.
all of these things are things I obviously struggle with, or I wouldn't be, reciting them to myself in the morning. But
Right.
I'm aware that I struggle with them, and I embrace that. And there is great strength. So look, whether it's breath work, like Lindsey does, whether it's meditation, prayer, all of the above, a morning mantra, develop the ability. And then you say, well, how do I get the energy to do it? You have to have faith in that thing. Just like you said, Lindsey, like if you have a little bit of faith that, hey, if I can just put on this costume and go out there, I'm going to come off feeling jacked up and full of energy again on the other side of this. Doesn't
Mhm.
that give you just a little more, the
Yeah,
faith in that outcome gives you just a little more strength to go do it?
absolutely. And, as I was listening to you share your mantra, which was so beautiful, by the way, you know, um, it just made me kind of make a little bit of a connection that I really, sorry, I get teary eyed sometimes when I, when I think of, I guess little nuggets of truth.
Yeah.
But I think that true confidence is love.
Mm,
I think it's the ability to realize that we get to give love to other people. Like that is the most genuine version of confidence. Like when you get to say like I want to look people in the eye and I want to share, like I want to have a moment of connection with my children. Like I want to walk down the halls and smile at people, like whatever it may be. Like I want to compliment someone. I want to go on stage and I hope the audience feels my heart. Like whatever version of like getting yourself up and like being like, I can do this. Honestly, I think usually the truest form of confidence comes from the ability to exercise your heart's ability to be bigger, to share love, to be kind, to reach out, to connect. Like that's what I think true confidence. There's confidence that can come across as egotistical or, lofty or people are aloof, but like when it's your heart that's the confident part, that's authentic, that's connecting, that's what's going to change the world, that's what allows you to be a light and a light of a child of god, of like
that's
the
right.
things you were talking about. Anyways, that just occurred to me.
No, I mean, you feel touched because the things you're saying are true. These are eternal principles. And look, they're packaged up in all kinds of different books and self-help, whatevers, and even practices. But the core fundamental concepts are true, and they will be true forever. And I think I just really, I believe that we are often conned by things that are almost true. Like, you mentioned authenticity, right? And that authentic love, right? That is power. That is true confidence. But then, Shawn, how can it be so authentic if, like, I got to wake up and, like, recite some morning mantra to remember to, like, look in my kids' eyes? How can that be authentic if I'm shaping myself that way? If we just leave ourselves to ourselves or to the world to be blown around as life comes at us, we I will tell you from experience, we will be disappointed with the outcome.
Mm.
We can develop the capacity to become more of these good things that we describe, Lindsey, to become more service oriented, to become more full of love. But just like the capacity to lift heavy things, it only can come by trying.
Yeah.
And yes, there are people who are born with more charisma than others, but by the way, they're going to lack in other ways. There are people that are born with more optimism naturally than others, but they're going to lack in some other way. There are people that are born with more talent, more musical ability. My daughter has perfect pitch. Like, I mean, you might. Most musicians don't. I
Oh,
don't.
I don't. I wish I did.
Literally, Lindsey, it's the wildest thing. Like, legitimately, no joke. From the time she was a toddler, she can identify notes and even, like, tell you if it's a little sharp or a little flat. Look, this is a natural born ability, but by the way, just like all humans, she'll have her own struggles in other areas, right?
Right.
Life is this great graphic equalizer. And if we're not willing to be honest with ourselves about where we lack and do things, whether, again, develop practices like we've described on this podcast, there's nothing inauthentic about that. That is just simply you trying to become a more even, more developed person. And the end result is success. Like, you've had success in your realm, Lindsey, because not in spite of your shortcomings, but because of your ability to address them in the ways that you've described, even here on this podcast. And I'm grateful, and you've been so generous with some very personal tactics, even. Just so let's go back to these micro thing for a second, because you mentioned at the top, even micro choices, like, as dumb as it sounds, as you said, like to go to a pool party in Nashville and overcome a little bit of that junior high fear that, by the way, if we're being honest, at least, look, there's only a sample of two of us, but I feel this way all the time. Here I am, like, middle-aged CEO of a public company who feels insecure and weird at all kinds of different events, even family gatherings at times. You know what I mean? Where we feel that same dumb being left out, not at the cool kids table, whatever, even moments of this, making these micro choices to just choose to push through. How do you get there?
I have gotten really good in my adult life at being uncomfortable. I'll say that. And I mean, as adults, a lot of times I think that we get very comfortable and we stop doing things that make us uncomfortable.
Mm,
A lot of adults will say, "Oh, I've always wanted to learn the violin. I've always wanted to learn the piano."
yeah.
Well, why don't you?
Yeah.
We still have the capacity to learn. It's just that as an adult, it's quite uncomfortable to be bad at things. It's quite uncomfortable to be a student and feel like I should have done this when I was younger. But I learned to dance as an adult. I learned to be an aerialist in my 30s. So I took my first aerial class was when I was 32 years old. I took my first comedy class the beginning of this year. Like
Mm.
I took an improv comedy class. Yes,
Talk about uncomfortable. That's
so
like,
uncomfortable, but it
mm,
was one of those things that had been on my list of I want to do that. I put it off for years, and finally I was like, you know what, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go sign up for that improv comedy class and show up every week. And oh my gosh, it was so uncomfortable and embarrassing, but it was one of the best things I've done for myself in years because it reminded me. Well, first of all, kind of we are talking about giving. Improv, your intuition is to think about yourself and to think about what you say next. Like that's what you want to do. It's a fight or flight, like survival tactic of not being embarrassed in front of your class. Like, what am I
mhm.
going to say next? They teach you over and over and over again. It's about listening. It's about supporting your scene partner. It's about being a good partner in the scene for them and protecting them. And you will know what to say if you are thinking about them and setting them up for success. And I don't know, it was just this like really, I learned so much from the class, but I think more than anything, it gave me this extra, speaking of confidence, this extra boost of confidence because I did something hard and scary. I survived it. I was uncomfortable. You realize it's totally fine to be uncomfortable in life. Yet again, teaching myself this muscle of being comfortable in the uncomfortable, which is the little micro choices that allow me to go to a pool party and realize that I will survive being uncomfortable, the same way I survived being on a silk, up in front of an audience, a little bit scared, or entering an improv class. Like, I think that one of the most important muscles to flex in order to learn confidence is not only to support your scene partner and listen and be there for other people and actually have confidence out of love, but secondly, you gain confidence by learning you'll survive being uncomfortable.
Wow. I just think it's so important for anyone listening to recognize that, Lindsey's not just successful because she has these attributes. Lindsey's successful because she is choosing to develop these attributes, and any one of us can make these choices, even on a micro level. You want to choose confidence, get at the root of it. Let's first choose to get a little better at being uncomfortable so that when those moments of confidence needed come around, we have the capacity for it. What are you doing today to develop, right, your ability to operate in discomfort? That's my question to everyone listening. In my case, I can think back to times where when I lived in Shanghai. So it's a long story, but I lived in Shanghai, I worked there. That's how I got that dream job that was waiting for me that I turned down. I used to practice going out to dinner on my own in restaurants because I didn't have anyone to go with. And I didn't want to just like sit in this dumb room that I was living in. And I got good at that. And I got totally comfortable in that. I got good at going to movies on my own at different times in my life where, at first it felt so weird and people were like, you got a movie on your, alone. And now I love it actually, because I'm a big like cinephile. I love movies and things like that. And these are dumb, again, back to micro choices. These are dumb things, right? These are not important things, but you
I don't
can.
think they are. I don't think
Okay.
they're dumb at all.
Yeah.
Like, no, I think those are things that, like, I think anytime you lean into something that you're like, this is a little hard for me, it's a little uncomfortable, but I want to do it. Like, I hear about people who go to dinner by themselves, and that sounds something that I should try. Like, I think those are really important choices.
Well, and whether they're simple, easy ones like that, like just go do it. Go to a sit down restaurant and table for one. And, don't just be scrolling on your phone either.
Yeah.
Like, get comfortable being there, in fact, and then, or by the way, go even further, I guess, committed and sign up for a comedy course. Oh my gosh, sign up for piano lessons. In my case, I woke up this morning and went surfing at 6 a.m. Listen, it's freezing. The Pacific is freezing. I'm here in San Diego, but I have a little bit of faith. And sure enough, I was right that when I come out of that water, I'm going to feel like $1,000,000 because I always do, whether I catch great waves or not. Mm-hmm. Paddling out, getting physical. It's tough. It's, it's freezing. I'm going to drown a little bit, but you have to have faith in that thing. You have to have faith in what's on the other side, enough to get you out of bed when the alarm rings, when it's so cozy inside. It's these micro choices, and they happen on an everyday basis. And even people of great success like Lindsey and I struggle. Even after we've developed some capacity for it, I continue to struggle, but I continue to overcome because I make these choices, as you do, Lindsey, every day, and continue to develop your capacity. If you don't continue to develop those muscles, you lose them, just like any muscle. And so it never ends. And I know that's kind of like a defeating message, but it never ends. The opportunity to choose confidence, the opportunity to make choices to develop yourself in any way, shape, or form, it has to happen on a daily basis, in my opinion. And if you forget one day, or you slack off, or you give yourself grace, and just start now, starting now.
Yeah, it's like, just make a choice to do something that was a little bit harder than maybe you would have normally chosen, I love your example of the cold water. That's a hard one. That's a hard one.
Well, it shouldn't be. Like, it sounds cool. Like, oh, you're a surfer, like, go surfing. It's still freezing. It's still 6 a.m. And, and like, if I don't move now, I've got other meetings I got to attend. So I got this thin window. Right. And sometimes, look, I make the choice to sleep in or to hit snooze or whatever. And so you got to give yourself grace the next day and move on. But what you can't do is wallow. Right. Um, but I love that we can develop the capacity. If you develop that capacity, you can then develop the strength to choose, confidence in those moments where you just have to choose. Because, by the way, what's amazing, we all know, if you've read anything, right? Like, confidence is one of the most attractive traits in human beings. And when I say attractive, I'm not talking about like your dating app or whatever. I'm just talking about your ability to attract success, your ability to have others attracted to you that can, bring you opportunity or make your life interesting. Confidence is at the root of it, like even before looks and everything else.
Yeah. I
And,
also,
and
oh,
yeah,
sorry.
no, you go.
I think it's also so important is you do try to go out and do hard things or, earn these little micro choices. I think it's so important to give yourself emotional gold stars. I do it all the time,
Awesome.
like don't discount the little things. Like, going to a restaurant by yourself, that's a big gold star. Taking a cold shower today, big gold star. And I
Mm.
think it's also going to depend on like where you're at emotionally. Like, you better believe when I've been in a really hard time in life, I get gold stars for really simple things. Like, I washed my dishes today and I sent a couple emails. Like, we're given some gold stars. So I think that really giving yourself these moments to look back and say, like, that was actually, even though it's small, it might not be hard for somebody else. That was hard for me. Like, give yourself those pats on the back. They're what are going to keep propelling you to do more and more hard things and gain more and more confidence, because even if no one else notices it's hard, like, we all know we have our own version of hard. And I think it's really important to look at the victories.
I love that. I love that. Give yourself grace, give yourself props for the things you do. Because look, in the end, no one else is watching, no one else really cares. And if you're not treating yourself with love, and so we have to watch our self talk. Like I got to catch myself all the time. We scold ourselves. I mean, there are moments where it's kind of good to call yourself names and get yourself out there in the cold water. You're like, don't be a pansy, get out there. But we have to be really careful with our self-talk because it really affects who we are, and we have to control it. So look, at like all these things, we could go on and on. We could spend another hour unpacking the mysteries of success together. But I just really hope that people can come away with the observation that the most successful people you can imagine, people like Lindsey that we see just shining on the internet, having all the accolades, all the success, looking like a superstar that she is. Behind that is a person who is struggling just like the rest of us, but who has developed some capacity, obviously, to muscle through, to deal with it, and to choose confidence. What those moments when it matters, when she puts on that costume, and then what comes of it is more confidence, more success, and the blessings that come, whether it's having paddled out and surfed or completing a show dangling on stage from silks that she was ill prepared to do the first time. But there's always a first time, and you wouldn't even know watching. Bear in mind, like, you see that celebrity, that superstar out there doing their thing, you wouldn't know that they're that insecure, that worried, maybe even that at risk. And then once they've done it once, they can do it 30, 50, 100 more times. They're a stone cold pro like Lindsey. So, Lindsey, in the spirit of Let Me Save You 25 Years, the name of the podcast, is there any last piece of advice that you'd leave with someone looking to shave a little chunk off their own 25-year journey that's been, for me, at Lovesac? You've been at this for a minute now. You've built your career to an amazing place. What do you wish that someone had told you a decade ago?
Well, I love this conversation. First of all, I love I love this idea of just like, yeah, what does it take to choose confidence? But I think one of my favorite bits of advice as a touring artist that I ever got was a performer told me, if you get bored with your show. Like a lot of artists are like, oh, I'm so tired of touring. I'm so bored with it. And she was like, that's your own fault. You create your show. If you're bored with it, that's on you. Like as a performer, you get to create the show you want. But I think in a deeper context, if you are unhappy and bored with your life, that is on you. We get to create the lives we live. And a lot of times they become these giant ships that you can't just like change direction in a day. But like if your ship is sailing in a direction that you are bored with or unhappy with or unfulfilled by, you also are the one who can slowly change that ship. You can start to take it. That's on you. And I don't mean that as tough love, but truly I run a lot of my life by that comment. Um, and I try to make sure that every day I'm making choices that are slowly guiding my ship in the place that makes me feel fulfilled and happy and joyful and giving and all the things. So like, where's your ship headed? If you're not happy with it, you do have the ability to change it.
This is your life happening to you right now, and you are the CEO of your own life. So steer it where you want it to go. Thank you. Everyone listening, be sure to follow Lindsey on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube at Lindsey, Landsey, Stirling, Stirling, Stirling. Crazy that you have all those handles with your name, Lindsey. Way to go. Check out your amazing organization, the upsidefund.org. And for all things Lindsey Stirling, tour dates, videos, and merchandise, go to her website, lindseystirling.com. She's on tour through October. So check her out. If she's in your area, I'm going to take my kids to see you, Lindsey. I'll let you know.
Yeah, we got to get you out to a show. You let me know.
100%. We got to get you to anyway, we'll talk. Stay tuned for her deluxe album of Duality coming out later this year. It'll be available. So pre-save that through her website. Thank you so much to the delightful dancer, the vivacious violinist, the mind-blowing, multi-talented musician herself, Lindsey Stirling. And remember, confidence isn't something you're born with. It's a daily choice to believe in yourself, stay present, speak kindly to your inner voice, and see the potential, not just in yourself, but in everyone around you. So go out there and choose confidence. It may just save you a chunk off your own 25-year journey. Thanks, Lindsey.
Thank you for having me.
Once a year to take my friends away should not be the budget for your bike across America.
TikTok has become an aggregator for some of the dumbest human actions.
When I won that million, I was $2 million in debt, barely hanging on.